There's something fascinating about those who move through life with effortless charm, not the kind that feels rehearsed or strategic, but the kind that seems to spill out naturally, unbothered, uncalculated, and disarmingly human. These are the people who make others feel lighter without even trying, who laugh without measuring the echo of their own voice, who stumble in conversation and somehow make the silence feel warm instead of awkward. Everyone knows someone like this, the friend who makes a room brighter without saying much, the stranger who turns a passing moment into something oddly unforgettable. But beneath that lightness, there's something deeper happening, a quiet psychological magic that few ever notice. Effortless charm isn't really effortless. It's the byproduct of a paradox, the paradox of the fool, the one who doesn't take themselves too seriously, who's comfortable enough to be imperfect in a world obsessed with image. The fool's approach to charm is not about performance. It's about permission, the permission to be seen as we are. The fool doesn't try to impress, they invite connection. They don't chase approval, they inspire comfort. And that's where the psychology begins to unfold. Modern psychology tells us that one of the strongest forms of connection comes from something called benign violation theory. It's a fancy term, but at its core, it means we like people who can bend the rules of normal behavior, just enough to surprise us, without crossing into discomfort. The fool lives in that delicate space. They break the invisible codes of seriousness with humor, self-awareness, and play. They remind us that humanity isn't supposed to be perfect. In their presence, our guard drops, because theirs already has. Charm, at its essence, is not about adding more, not more confidence, more wit, more polish. It's about subtraction, removing the masks, the scripts, the constant self-monitoring. The people who seem most charming are often simply those who've stopped trying to perform the role of a charming person. Their ease creates ease, and that's why we lean in. Not because they sparkle brighter, but because they feel real in a world of filters. Psychologists call this phenomenon emotional contagion. We subconsciously mirror the emotional state of those around us. If someone radiates calm, we feel calm. If someone carries anxiety, we sense it. Effortless charm is rooted in self-regulation, the ability to feel comfortable in one's own skin. It's not arrogance, it's safety, and safety is magnetic. When someone is grounded enough to let their imperfections show, it tells our nervous system, you're safe here too. It's ironic though, so many chase charm as if it's something to master, a social skill to acquire, a secret pattern to learn, but charm dies the moment it becomes a performance. You can't fake relaxation while trying to be relaxed. You can't simulate spontaneity while rehearsing it. The fool understands this. Their charm isn't in the act, but in the surrender. They don't overthink what to say next because they aren't trying to win anyone's approval. That unguarded authenticity, that's what people can't look away from. There's a strange freedom in not needing to be impressive. Studies in social psychology often point to something called the Pratfall Effect. It suggests that people who are generally competent become more likable when they make small, harmless mistakes. Spilling coffee, forgetting a line, laughing at themselves. These moments humanize us. The fool lives inside that effect. They stumble with grace. They fail with laughter. And in doing so, they unlock something powerful, relatability. Relatability is one of the deepest currencies of charm. When someone feels too perfect, we admire them, but from a distance. When someone feels human, we trust them. Effortless charm is trust made visible. It tells the world, I'm not perfect, but I'm okay with that. And suddenly everyone else feels okay too. But there's another layer to the fool's approach, humility. True humility is not shrinking oneself or pretending to be small, is the understanding that everyone is a mirror, reflecting different shades of our own humanity. The fool doesn't try to dominate a room, they dance with it. They notice people, they listen deeply, they respond to energy, not ego. That's the quiet art behind their presence, an awareness that charm isn't something you broadcast, it's something you build in the spaces between. In conversations, they do something subtle but powerful. They let moments breathe. They don't rush to fill silence because silence doesn't scare them. They don't listen just to reply. They listen to feel. And that difference is everything. Most people think speaking well makes you charming. But in truth, being present does. The fool's mind isn't calculating, it's observing. They find humor in the unnoticed, depth in the ordinary, and light in moments most people rush past. Effortless charm often looks like play, and play is one of the most underestimated psychological forces in human connection. In adulthood, play becomes rare, even suspicious. We learn to equate seriousness with intelligence and spontaneity with recklessness. But play signals confidence, the kind that says, "I'm not afraid to be seen enjoying life." That energy draws people in because it taps into something ancient in us, the joy of shared curiosity. The fool doesn't just entertain, they awaken something childlike, that brief suspension of fear where we remember how to simply exist. Yet, there's depth behind the laughter. The fool isn't naive, they're brave. It takes courage to be open in a world that rewards control, to smile without calculation, to joke without safety nets, to risk misunderstanding. That's emotional exposure. In psychological terms, it's vulnerability, but not the kind that demands sympathy. It's vulnerability wrapped in strength, the willingness to say, "Here I am," without needing the world to clap for it. And this brings us to one of the most profound truths about charm. It's less about attraction and more about permission. When you encounter someone effortlessly charming, what you're really feeling is the freedom they grant you. The freedom to be a little less guarded, a little more yourself. The fool's approach invites authenticity in others by embodying it. It's not manipulation, it's resonance. They don't push energy into a room, they draw it out of people. Sometimes what makes them so magnetic is precisely their unpredictability. The fool doesn't follow a script, they follow curiosity. They wander through conversation like explorers, not politicians. They aren't afraid to look silly, to ask naive questions, to admit they don't know. In doing so, they remind others that not knowing is okay, that curiosity is more beautiful than certainty. That's how the fool turns vulnerability into power, by reframing imperfection as connection. Effortless charm, then, isn't about being the smartest, funniest, or most attractive person in the room. It's about creating space where everyone feels slightly more alive. It's a presence that whispers rather than shouts, that invites rather than performs. The psychology behind it can be explained in countless ways: emotional mirroring, confidence calibration, dopamine triggers. But at its heart, it's something ancient and simple, authenticity mixed with lightness. And maybe that's the secret modern culture keeps forgetting. We chase charisma as though it's a science, but the truth is, it's more like music. You can't force rhythm, you feel it. The fool dances to their own internal song, offbeat maybe, but always in tune with something real. And when others feel that rhythm, they move closer without even realizing why. Because in a world where everyone's trying to look like they have it all figured out, the one who's unafraid to look foolish becomes the most trustworthy of all. There's a strange irony in how people chase the very thing that only appears when you stop chasing it. Charm, confidence, ease, all these qualities evaporate the moment you try to grip them too tightly. The fool understands this on an instinctive level. They don't try to control how others see them, because their focus is on how they experience the world. They're not performing to be liked, they're playing to feel alive. And that shift from external validation to internal enjoyment changes everything. It's the difference between charm as a mask and charm as a mirror. What most people call effortless is really emotional alignment. When your words, actions, and emotions are congruent, people feel it. Humans are remarkably good at sensing micro discrepancies. The tiny hesitations, the forced smiles, the overly polished tones that signal someone's not being fully real. The fool doesn't need to hide behind those defenses. Their humor is genuine, their laughter unfiltered, their presence unarmored. They might make mistakes, sure, but those mistakes become part of their rhythm. In psychology, this is sometimes referred to as self-concordance, acting in ways that are aligned with one's authentic values and identity. It's not about what looks right, it's about what feels right. And that's where charm becomes something deeper. Not a tool for persuasion, but a form of artful honesty. The fool teaches, without teaching, that being likable isn't about trying to please everyone. It's about showing up as yourself so clearly that people can make their own choice. That clarity feels rare, almost sacred, because deep down, what people crave most isn't perfection, it's realness. And realness in a world of performance feels like oxygen. There's a quiet philosophy embedded in this way of being. It says, I am enough as I am right now. Not because of achievements, not because of how many people approve, but because existence itself is permission. The fool carries that truth in their posture, in their laughter, in their gaze that never seems to hide. They remind us of something we forget while trying to become impressive, that connection starts where the masks end. Sometimes the most magnetic person in the room isn't the loudest or the most confident. It's the one who isn't afraid to be fully present. They're not glancing at their phone, not waiting for their turn to speak. They're just there. The psychology of presence is profound. When we give someone our full attention, their brain literally registers safety. Heart rate slows, cortisol drops, oxytocin rises. The fool gives that gift without even knowing it. They make people feel seen, and in that moment, people fall. Not for the fool, but for how they feel around them. It's worth noting that effortless charm doesn't mean ignorance. The fool isn't oblivious, they're aware. They notice nuances, the shift in tone, the small discomfort, the unspoken emotions floating in a room. But they don't analyze those details through fear. They move through them with empathy. They're emotionally intelligent, but not in a manipulative way, more like emotionally fluent. They know how to match energy, when to lighten a mood, when to listen, when to laugh. It's not calculation, it's sensitivity paired with courage. In many ways, the fool is a living contradiction. They seem carefree, but they're deeply aware. They appear unserious, yet they understand people better than most. They make others laugh, yet there's wisdom behind every playful word. That's the essence of the fool's approach. Wisdom hidden in simplicity, depth disguised as lightness. It's not that they don't know the rules of the world, it's that they've learned to dance with them instead of being imprisoned by them. The psychology behind that freedom lies in cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift perspectives, to hold contradictions, to play with ideas rather than being trapped by them. The fool doesn't think in rigid lines. They flow. They see the humor in what others take too seriously and the meaning in what others dismiss. This mental elasticity makes them adaptive, curious, and endlessly interesting. They're not bound by the need to be right. They're fascinated by what might be true. Think of the last time you met someone who seemed effortlessly charming. You probably left the interaction feeling lighter, inspired, or strangely comfortable in your own skin. That's because charm, when real, doesn't impose. It liberates. It gives you back to yourself. You laugh more freely, speak more honestly, feel more at ease. It's not that the fool fills the room with their energy. It's that they make space for yours. This kind of presence has roots in ancient philosophy. The Stoics spoke of apatheia, not as indifference, but as emotional balance. The ability to stay centered regardless of what happens. The fool embodies this balance through play. Their joy isn't naive, it's chosen. It's a rebellion against the heaviness of self-consciousness. They understand that life, in all its chaos, is easier to navigate when you treat it like a dance rather than a debate. And that's where the fool's charm becomes almost spiritual. It isn't about seduction or influence. It's about connection to something bigger than the self. When someone can laugh at their own mistakes, when they can admit not knowing, when they can turn an awkward moment into shared laughter, they're reminding everyone that being human is not a flaw, it's a privilege. That reminder carries a strange healing energy. It softens the air around them. Even neuroscience supports this idea. Laughter, shared joy, and spontaneous play release endorphins and dopamine, neurochemicals that bond people. The fool unknowingly becomes a biological connector. They shift the chemistry of a space without effort, simply by being open. That's why people remember them, not because of their looks, their words, or their achievements, but because of how their presence felt. There's a subtle lesson here for anyone who's ever tried too hard to impress. The moment you try to engineer charm, it slips away. The more you chase the image of being likable, the further you drift from genuine connection. The fool's charm emerges from detachment, Not apathy, but the absence of desperation. They care, but they're not ruled by the outcome. They know that the beauty of an interaction isn't in being admired, but in being real. Some might mistake this approach for recklessness, but it's not. It's faith. Faith in the power of authenticity. Faith that showing up imperfectly is still enough. The fool doesn't fear looking foolish because they know the deeper foolishness lies in living life scared of being seen. And when they stumble, they turn it into rhythm. When they're misunderstood, they laugh and clarify. That resilience, that refusal to armor the heart, is what makes their charm so rare. If you study history, art, or storytelling, you'll notice that the fool archetype has always been present, from Shakespeare's jesters to the wandering philosophers, from tricksters in myths to comedians in modern times. These figures were never merely for laughs. They carried truth disguised in humor. They said what others were afraid to say. They pointed out the absurdity of life and helped people see it with gentler eyes. In psychology, this archetype represents integration, the blending of intellect and innocence, wisdom and play. It's a reminder that maturity isn't about losing wonder. It's about balancing it with understanding. So what can one learn from this fool's approach to charm? Perhaps it's that charm isn't a technique to practice, but a truth to remember. That people are drawn not to perfection, but to permission. That real charisma begins the moment you stop performing and start participating, fully, messily, joyfully, in the moment in front of you. Effortless charm isn't something you have, it's something you allow. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of it all, that the fool's greatest trick is not deception, but presence. They teach by existing, by embodying a state of freedom most people spend their whole lives chasing. Their laughter isn't just sound, it's philosophy. Their play isn't just lightheartedness, it's wisdom in motion. They're living proof that life becomes lighter when you stop trying to be someone else's idea of impressive. In the end, the psychology of effortless charm is the psychology of peace. Peace with one's flaws, peace with uncertainty, peace with being seen as imperfect. The fool's approach says, be brave enough to look silly. Be wise enough to stay curious. Be kind enough to let others feel safe being themselves around you. That's not just charm, that's connection, distilled to its purest form. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that anyone can embody it. You don't need to be the loudest, the wittiest, or the most confident. You only need to let go of the need to be perfect, of the fear of being misunderstood, of the weight of constant self-comparison. The fool's secret isn't hidden knowledge, it's surrender. It's remembering that life is not a performance, it's a conversation. And when you show up as yourself, unfiltered, open, alive, you'll find that charm was never something to learn. It was something you were meant to remember.